Tonight on Reporting Scotland, we hear from Paralympian David Smith, whose cancer has returned and is facing the choice of surgery that could leave him paralysed.
If you ask me right now, what would you choose? Would you choose to have the surgery tomorrow and wake up paralysed from the neck down and remove a tumour that's only going to grow back again? Or would you love to go and live another 6 months doing what you do? I would take the 6 months doing what I'm doing.
Also coming up on the programme, the Scottish Conservative leader calls on critics in her own party to get behind the Prime Minister's Brexit plan. The brother of a Scottish Sikh who's been in prison in India for 10 months says the UK government would be doing more to help if he was white. Opposition grows to plans that would allow seaweed on the west coast to be mechanically harvested. And we'll be at the Davis Cup at the Emirates Arena in Glasgow, where Scotland's Cameron Norrie has been in action. Good evening. Paracyclist David Smith says he's willing to risk his life to continue competing and doing what he loves. In February of last year, Smith was given the all clear after 7 years of treatment for cancerous spinal tumours. But this summer, he learned the tumour has returned. However, he says he won't rush into having it removed because the surgery comes with a risk. He's been speaking to Jane Lewis.
Last month, he was competing in Canada. Last week, he was finishing a gruelling 700-kilometre ride across the Alps. But that doesn't tell the whole story. A scan in June revealed bad news.
The surgeon was very sort of black and white. He said, look, this has grown back again. We're not exactly sure the rate of growth because you've not come for a scan now for some time, but it is coming back and it's a very aggressive tumour and it's in an extremely dangerous place. And that news, I left the hospital and ran away. I went to Canada to race for Britain in the last Para World Cup. I buried my head on my bike. Whilst out there, I then booked on a trip to go and cycle across the Alps. The hospital were calling me every day and eventually I answered the call which said you need to come back in. So I went in and they said, look, we need another scan. So they did another scan and at that point the guy who scanned me basically said, go and enjoy your life.
Any sensation? Smith has endured an incredible battle. He was diagnosed with a tumour in 2010, but after surgery he recovered and won rowing gold at the London Paralympics. He switched to cycling, but faced a similar fight. The tumour returned in 2014. Another operation followed, as did a long recovery. He says that left him in a dark place, so this time plans to seek alternative treatment.
I have a dream of World Track Championships in March and the World Road Champs next year in August. With that in mind, I don't want to rush into surgery, so what I'm trying to do is find alternative methods that can just buy me time, and that's hard to even understand. That most logical decisions would be, well, let's have the surgery and try and save your life, and I'm thinking, well, I'm willing to risk my life to do what I love. And I think as long as that balance is in my favour and I can still ride and I can still breathe and I can get around, then I'm not going to rush into surgery this time, and that might buy me 4 months. It might buy me 4 years, I'm not sure. And at the point, if it's got to a point where it's like, okay, this is now risking your life, and I'll have a surgeon ready and I'll go into surgery.
Is there not a fear that that's a massive risk?
It's a huge fear, but the surgery is also a massive risk. And every time I've gone for surgery, the massive risk has been paralysis from the neck down, on a ventilator for the rest of your life. And if you ask me right now, what would you choose? Would you choose to have the surgery tomorrow and wake up paralysed from the neck down and remove a tumour that's only going to grow back again? Or would you love to go and live another 6 months doing what you do? I would take the 6 months doing what I'm doing.
Jane Lewis, Reporting Scotland.
The Scottish Conservative leader has called for the Prime Minister's Tory critics to quit the noise and stop attacking her from the sidelines. Ruth Davidson told the BBC that Theresa May should be allowed space to deliver a departure deal from the EU. But the SNP says Brexit is all about a Tory civil war and ministers now need to avoid a hard Brexit to save jobs. Here's our political correspondent Andrew Kerr.
Ruth Davidson has been a staunch supporter of Theresa May as the Prime Minister attempts to forge ahead with her plan for a Brexit deal.
Can the Chequers deal survive, Prime Minister?
She's had a torrid week, with internal party critics lining up to question her leadership. Her former policy advisor, the Tory MP George Freeman, says she should quit and make way for a younger generation after Brexit.
Is the Chequers deal dead, do you think, today?
There's also the spectre of the former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, perhaps waiting to pounce. Ruth Davidson says it's time to stop carping from the sidelines.
I backed Theresa May in the last leadership that obviously Boris withdrew from. I back her now, I back her in the future. She's the Prime Minister of this country and she needs to have people quit the noises off and let her deliver in this really crucial moment in our country's history.
But can the Prime Minister deliver on a Brexit agreement?
So just your prediction then, deal or no deal?
Deal.
Really?
Yes.
How come?
Well, I think you've already seen the mood music change in recent weeks. I know that colleagues are more confident now than they have been at any time in the last few months that a deal can be reached. I think we've seen leading players within the EU, like Jean-Paul Juncker, saying that things like the free trade area that has been proposed under Chequers should absolutely now be the basis for that going forward.
Labour said today a no-deal Brexit would plunge the country into chaos. The SNP agreed.
What's been clear since day one is that leaving the European Union is all about a Tory civil war, and Tory politicians are more concerned about fighting with their own colleagues. What they need to be focused on is trying to improve a relationship with Europe, saving jobs that are being put at risk by a Tory hard Brexit. That should be Ruth Davidson's priority.
Ruth Davidson may be bullish on Brexit, but her summer has been dogged by accusations over so-called dark money. That's funds to the Tory party from the Scottish Unionist Association Trust. The Electoral Commission is still investigating into how the trust has been registered. The SNP claimed the Tories were shielding donations from view. The leader says that's not the case.
I think it's important to point out that there's utter transparency about where the money comes from. It comes from the sale of properties in the 60s that was declared. That the party, when the Electoral Commission was set up in 2001, that the Association Trust registered with them and was registered as a permissible donor. Every single penny the Scottish Party has received down the years since the 1960s from there has been declared in the same way as everyone else and has always, been declared, and we've worked with the Electoral Trust on that.
The SNP say they still have concerns. The Tory leader has concerns too, as party conference is around the corner. Andrew Kerr, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Detectives investigating the drive-by murder of a father of two are following up new leads on the getaway car. 32-year-old Gary Moore was shot up to 10 times last Thursday night. Officers revisited the scene hours after Mr Moore's sister made an emotional public appeal yesterday afternoon. They spoke to about 40 people and obtained new information about the stolen white Skoda Fabia, which was torched in the north of Glasgow. Ross County Football Club has suspended a member of its staff following a complaint which is being investigated by police. The Dingwall Club said the matter was referred to Police Scotland, adding it would be inappropriate to make any further comment at this time. Police Scotland said it had received a report and its inquiries were ongoing. Two hillwalkers missing overnight in the Cairngorms have been found following a major search operation. The men called for help yesterday evening after they became lost in mist on Brí Riach. Cairngorm Mountain Rescue Team stood down their search in the early hours due to poor weather. The team, assisted by the Coast Guard helicopter from Prestwick, discovered the pair this morning. Police Scotland say they're in good health. The brother of a Scottish Sikh who's been detained in India for 10 months believes the British government would be doing more to help if he was white. Jagtar Singh Johal from Dumbarton is accused of a number of killings in Punjab. His family say he's innocent. Katie Hunter reports.
Jagtar Singh Johal has appeared in court more than 50 times. He says he was tortured in custody, a claim the Indian authorities deny. Jagtar's family say the Foreign Office could be doing more to help and believe the colour of his skin is a factor.
I don't want to use a race card, but I'm having to use the race card. I believe if Jagtar wasn't brown, the UK government may have done more. And it's with shame I'm having to say that, given that I've been brought up here, born here, and I'm having to say this about the government.
The Foreign Office says it acts professionally, regardless of race, and that its staff continue to visit Jagtar regularly and raise concerns with the Government of India about allegations of torture, mistreatment and his right to a fair trial. According to one Indian charge sheet, the 31-year-old is accused of helping to fund a series of killings in Punjab, allegedly carried out by the Khalistan Liberation Force, a group described as a terrorist gang by the Indian authorities. It's claimed Jagtar had complete knowledge of the conspiracy. But his MP says there's no proof to support these allegations.
We've had over 50 appearances in court, in various courts across the whole of the north of India, and not one shred of evidence has been brought forward by the state authorities. And that's a ridiculous proposition, given the fact that since last year, they have said that they have this case sewn up the back. They now need to move forward and bring the case to court.
We've contacted the Indian authorities but haven't had a response. In the past, they've said due process is being followed. Jagtar's lawyer says he's been charged in connection with one case, but no witnesses have been produced in court. His family say the uncertainty is hard to take.
It's heartbreaking even with the children, because the children are asking when's their uncle coming back. When you ask them about India, and they're like, we're never going back to India again because this is what they've done to our uncle.
Jagtar is due back in court later this month. His family want to meet the Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt to discuss his case. Katie Hunter, reporting Scotland.
Members of the Unite Union have staged a protest ahead of this weekend's Davis Cup event at the Emirates Arena in Glasgow. About 35 employees are due to take part in strike action in a dispute over pay allowances for staff who are setting up and de-rigging events at the stadium. Unite said it expected the action to have a significant impact. But employers Glasgow Life say the action is unnecessary and the venue will continue to operate as normal. The chief executive of RBS has been accused of withholding information about alleged criminality at the bank by MPs. Mr McEwen told the Treasury Select Committee earlier this year he was not aware of allegations.
Do you think there's been any criminal activity within the bank by your staff?
Not that we have seen or have reported, and certainly none that the police or serious fraud officer are looking at to our knowledge.
Well, it's since emerged that Police Scotland is investigating allegations related to a former employee. That sparked an angry reaction from the committee's chair. Let's speak now to our political correspondent at Westminster, Nick Eardley. So Nick, what's this row all about?
Well, Laura, that clip that you just saw is from the Treasury Select Committee back in January. As you say, since then it's emerged that a former employee is being investigated by Police Scotland. The force said today that investigation was continuing. But the fact it wasn't disclosed has led to quite a furious reaction from the committee's chair, Nicky Morgan. She's accusing Mr McEwen of withholding important information. She says that he was less than open and transparent, as the committee would expect. She's gone as far as to say that it undermines the idea that there's been a culture change under Mr McEwen's leadership at the bank. Now, he completely denies that. He says that he was answering in good faith and was speaking about a particular part of the bank that was being investigated by the committee. That said, for RBS, which of course is still trying to rebuild its reputation, this is less than welcome.
Nick at Westminster, thank you. You're watching BBC Reporting Scotland. It's 18 minutes to 7. A reminder of tonight's top story. An agonising choice. David Smith, the Paralympian who has to decide between a cancer surgery that could leave him paralysed or losing his life to the disease. And still to come, we're counting down to the musical spectacular celebrating Dundee's V&A Museum. There's growing concern on Scotland's west coast about plans to allow a company to mechanically harvest seaweed. The issue was raised at Holyrood this week by Green MSP John Finney, and an online petition against the plan is gaining support. Marine Biopolymers, the business behind the move, says it will bring sustainable employment to rural communities. Ian McInnes has more.
It's not a bad office, is it? And the tools are fairly simple too. Ailsa hand-cut seaweed near Ullapool.
Well, this one's bladder wrack, so I don't pick much of this, but people...
It's then dried and sold on nationwide. But plans for commercial harvesting of kelp, a type of seaweed, across the West Coast have prompted concerns, including an online petition.
Harvesting seaweed is not a new thing on these shores. It's been happening for hundreds of years, going back to the 1700s when there was a thriving kelp industry in the Western Isles. But more recently, chemicals called alginates, which come from seaweed, have been used in everyday products, from toothpaste and oils to improving the head on your favourite pint of beer.
Collateral damage to other species is enormous. There's lots of us along the coast that rely on that habitat for our jobs. Fishermen, wildlife tourism, we all need oxygen. Nobody wants their house to get washed away. I mean, we should be protecting this. It should be an absolute, it just shouldn't be an option.
Marine biopolymers who are behind the plans have identified areas from near Ullapool on the mainland through many West Coast island communities where the kelp is plentiful. This would include the Inner Hebridean Isle of Tiree, prompting concerns about coastal erosion in this low-lying island.
Kelp's a very big, very important defender of the shores that we can see behind us against the gales, and if the kelp defences are reduced, then erosion, which we already know is a problem, will get quite a lot worse.
Marine biopolymers say the proposals would bring sustainable employment to rural communities and would bring a cutting-edge business which is green at heart.
This is the promise we hear from a lot of developers, whether that's golf course developers or other people, that employment is very important, and I'm very keen to have employment, but I'm keen to have sustainable employment, not one that's based on an unsustainable harvest regime as dredging would be.
The plans, though, are at an early stage, with further consultation expected in the coming months. Ian McInnes, reporting Scotland, near Ullapool.
About 900 trees are to be felled at a National Trust garden in Argyll in a bid to halt the spread of a deadly disease. The Japanese larch trees will be brought down next week to combat the spread of a plant pathogen that causes sudden oak death. The National Trust has been managing the disease at Ardwain Garden since the first case in Scotland was discovered there in 2007. Scotland's Cameron Norrie is trying to do an Andy Murray and inspire Britain's Davis Cup tennis team to a win in Glasgow. They're taking on Uzbekistan at the Emirates Arena in the city's East End, where we can join our reporter Kardeen Itsan.
Yes, big-time tennis is back in the East End of Glasgow. The Emirates Arena here hosting Great Britain against Uzbekistan. In the absence of Andy Murray, Cameron Norrie is the Scottish #1 and British #2. He's on court right now and he's trying to surf the wave of emotion that was created by his teammate Dan Evans, who put in a superb performance earlier this afternoon to put Great Britain 1-0 up in this tie. An excellent performance from Dan Evans, who was clearly emotional afterwards after he beat Dennis Istomin in 5 sets in a thrilling match in which he needed 6 match points to win. He was emotional because he has just returned to the fold this year. He returned in April after serving a 1-year drugs ban, and it was very emotional indeed for Dan Evans when he got the job done here to the acclaim of his teammates and his captain Leon Smith. So the question is, can Cameron Norrie capitalise on that great win? It was an emotional welcome for him, a really good welcome into this Emirates Arena. His dad Davis used to play tennis at Kings Park, that's not too far away from here. So when he walked on, it was an understandably big moment for Cameron Norrie. How would he fare? Could he calm his early nerves? Well, he absolutely did. It's been a good start here for Cameron Norrie. He was able to get through the first 3 games without losing a single one. So he's in a really good position to see out the rest of this match. And if he can win, that would put Great Britain in a fantastic position, because with Davis Cup it is 5 matches over the course of a weekend, and with a 2-0 advantage, Great Britain could seal the win tomorrow with the doubles with Jamie Murray. So if Cameron Norrie can win here, then Jamie Murray and Dom Inglot could seal the win for Great Britain here at the Emirates tomorrow. Kerry Nidsan reporting Scotland at the Emirates Arena in Glasgow.
Dundee's V&A Museum opens its door to the public tomorrow. Tickets for the opening weekend were snapped up weeks ago. To help celebrate the occasion, the city's hosting a festival which is underway tonight and continues throughout tomorrow. A music and light show is being staged at the nearby Slessor Gardens, and our reporter Andrew Anderson joins us from there. Andrew.
Yes, good evening. It's a little bit noisy here in Slessor Gardens, the new civic space on Dundee's waterfront. They've staged a number of concerts here over the last year or so. Just over the road is the V&A building, the Museum of Design, with its amazing exhibitions inside. Now, they decided they wanted a festival to mark this weekend's opening of the V&A, so they've come up with the 3D Festival tonight and tomorrow. Primal Scream headline the concert tonight, and they're expecting around 20,000 people to attend over the next couple of days. And young people from the local area, they've played a really big part in deciding the content of this festival to make them feel involved with the opening of the V&A. A short time ago, I spoke to the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. She made her first visit to see the completed building, and she told me what she thought about it.
It is absolutely stunning, breathtaking. You know, I came here today with very high expectations, but those expectations have been wildly exceeded. This is world class, and you know, I am overawed by what I've just seen. You know, externally it's stunning, but the exhibitions inside really do take your breath away.
Now, this concert ends tonight with a light show projected onto those curving walls of the V&A. I'm told it's something special and worth watching. And then, of course, the building opens to the general public tomorrow. You've got to have a ticket, and those went a long time ago. But this really does feel like a very special weekend for Dundee.
Andrew, enjoy it. Thank you. And you can see more coverage of tonight's celebrations on BBC Two at 9 o'clock tonight. The Clan Buchanan has its first chief in nearly 340 years. John Michael Bailey Hamilton Buchanan has assumed the chiefship and will be known as the Buchanan. The title was last held by his ancestor John Buchanan, who died without a male heir in 1681. And finally, 2 rare Amur leopard cubs born in the Highland Wildlife Park have been caught on camera for the first time. The Royal Zoological Society of Scotland announced in July that its Amur leopard Arena had given birth. However, they didn't know how many cubs were born. Motion-sensitive cameras have now shown 2 emerging from their den deep within the undergrowth. It's hoped at least one of them may be released into the wild in Russia in the future, which would be a world first. Let's take a look at the weather now with Christopher. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much indeed, Laura, and good evening to you at home. There was a lot of dry weather around today, but also a fair amount of wet weather at times too. This was the picture on the Ayrshire coast a little earlier, but take a look at the radar and you can see this band of rain moving through. And this was the result in Kilmarnock, not far away, at mid-afternoon. Difficult conditions for a few motorists there. Now, the good news is most of that wet weather on its way out, clearing away down towards England, and that means we're largely dry overnight. A few showers in the northwest, but with clear skies, it will be chilly for some of us. Town and city temperatures around about 4 to 8 Celsius, but some rural parts of the northeast down to 2 or 3. So, to tomorrow, and we have high pressure to the south, low pressure up towards the northwest, trying to edge its way in, but that high pressure just stalling its progress somewhat, and that means a largely dry day for most of us. In the south, to start things off, some cloud and outbreaks of rain through parts of Dumfriesshire and the borders. That should clear by lunchtime. Elsewhere, reasonably dry, with some sunshine in the northeast. The cloud, though, thickening all the while, producing a few showers. So, by mid-afternoon, say around 4 o'clock, it is a fairly cloudy picture. Some showers or showery rain just approaching the west coast. Elsewhere, the cloud will be thicker compared with the morning, and that could offer 1 or 2 light showers. Temperatures 14 or 15 Celsius, winds from the southwest and strengthening. Still some sunshine, though, through parts of Caithness and Sutherland, and indeed the Northern Isles, where it should remain dry and bright until sunset. So, if you're hill walking or climbing tomorrow, the winds will be key from the southwest. Steady speeds there around 20 miles an hour, but actually strengthening through the course of the day. And certainly western ranges having some fairly thick cloud at times, some light rain or drizzle too. The further east that you are, more likely to have dry and fine conditions, but the cloud will build certainly through the afternoon. And then into Saturday night, the rain really arrives, quite heavy and persistent actually. So if you're out in the town Saturday night, it could well be a wet one to come home to. And The good news is that rain, whilst it's with us overnight, is moving through at a pace. So come Sunday morning, it's clearing away from the south fairly smartly. So to start things off on Sunday, largely cloudy, still some outbreaks of rain in the far south, but clearing and drying up and brightening up behind. And certainly by mid-afternoon, the borders should be dry and fine too, although at the same time, a little more rain just pushing in towards the northwest. For many of us, though, to end Sunday, dry with some sunshine, up to around 17 degrees, still breezy though. And then next week, we need to keep an eye on this area of low pressure. It's what was Hurricane Helene. By the time it reaches our shores, no longer a hurricane, but it could well pack a punch in terms of some pretty disgusting weather. Wet and windy fare overnight Monday to Tuesday. That's the forecast for now.
Thanks, Christopher. And now a reminder of tonight's main news. The inquest into the death of the police officer killed during the Westminster terror attacks hears details of attempts to save his life. PC Keith Palmer was unarmed when he was stabbed to death by Khalid Masood in March last year. Today, his family questioned why there'd been no armed officers to protect their brother on the day of the attack. And paracyclist David Smith says he's willing to risk his life to continue competing. After being told last year he was cancer-free after 7 years, he found out this summer that it had returned. But he says the operation to remove his spinal tumours could put a halt to his career. And Hurricane Florence has hit the east coast of the United States, causing widespread flooding and power cuts. The governor of North Carolina says the storm's wreaking havoc and whole communities could be wiped away. That's Reporting Scotland for now. I'll be back with the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, from all of us here, have a great evening. Bye-bye.